I think the first thing that will have occurred to many of you when you saw that I'd written this book is uh, how did he have the nerve after all the other good books that have been written about Lyndon Johnson? And the truth was, even though I'm not known for excessive modesty, even I had to stop think for a while about whether to do it or not because there are some really good books that have been written about Johnson. Uh, and Robert Caro's Master of the Senate, I think, is a masterpiece. And the Robert Dalek's book is very, very good. Doris Kearns Goodwin's book is very, very good. Randall Wood's, a recent biographer, very, very good. But what made me decide was this, that I found I had so many experiences that some of these other people didn't have. And I had been just a minor cog in the Kennedy Johnson administration, but I had been here for the 7 years of the administration. I knew many of the people, both in the Kennedy camp and in the Johnson camp, which gave me an unusual insight into those relationships between Bobby and Jack and LBJ, which I think are so crucial to understanding LBJ. And then I thought I had a lot of common experiences with LBJ, even though he was about 15 years older. But we had both lived through the Depression. And that makes a tremendous impression on anybody who does, because it teaches you that good people can be down and out. Good people can have a hard time finding a job. And so you always, you can never have the hard heart that some people on the right seem to have sometime about those people. The other thing with Johnson was we were both FDR worshipers, and that had, I think it has Johnson. I think it was near a religion with Johnson, as indeed it was with me, and I think it had a lot to do with the Great Society, of Johnson's whole motivation for the Great Society, as did that experience of living through the Depression. Then living through Munich, the effect that had on Johnson's attitude in Vietnam and on his colleagues' attitude toward Vietnam and on my own, it was immense. Then we both had accents that made a lot of people in the North immediately start condescending and saying, and you always felt that you had to work your way back from an immediate assumption that you were some slob. And so I understood that side of LBJ because I'd been there too. So finally, I'd been a page and then a staff member and then finally a member of the legislature in West Virginia. So I knew how hard it was to get a liberal bill passed in the 1950s and early 60s. I knew that, so I understood the miracle of the 1957 Civil Rights Bill, for instance, where Johnson managed to get the United States Congress and all those Southerners on record as saying these people had their rights. Well, back then, a lot of my liberal friends thought, well, that bill didn't go far enough. It was toothless. Well, of course, it was toothless, all right, but it got those people on the record. So that later on they always had to admit that they'd conceded these things were rights. So the passage of that bill is an illustration of Johnson's legislative genius, which I think no president except Franklin Roosevelt compares with him in terms of being able to get legislation enacted. And certainly in this bill, first and foremost, he persuaded his friend Richard Russell to persuade the South not to filibuster. Well, back in those days, they didn't automatically filibuster every bill as the Republicans seem to be doing today, but they did on civil rights bills. The filibuster was a pretty automatic response. Still, it all the more impressive that Johnson got Russell to persuade his fellow Southerners not to filibuster that bill. And then in the passage of the bill, Johnson, the Southerners had insisted that there be a jury trial amendment. And the jury trial amendment was that if there were a civil rights violation, they would have to be tried by jury. Well, that meant to any Northerner, well, this is the way these guys are going to get around it, because down south, the jury is going to be segregated. Well, so what are we going to do? Well, Frank Church had the idea that Johnson immediately embraced. We'll amend that amendment to require that the jury be desegregated. So, and this was the crucial moment that got the Northern liberals on board for the bill, which was very important. And so Church got up, proposed the amendment to Senator Joseph O'Malley of Wyoming had the floor, and O'Malley said he saw the sense of the amendment, but then this was still the day, which is hard to believe ever existed, but this was still the day when you could convince members of the Senate during a debate. And that really happened. But it happened a good many times back then. And on this day was one of them. So Johnson had arranged for this little dialogue to occur between O'Malley and Senator Pastore, who got up and said, well, I see this objection to that amendment, and O'Malley would gradually deal with that objection. And then Pastore would say, but I see this other objection. And O'Malley would say, well, here's the answer to that. And so on about 3 or 4 times. And finally, Pastore had to concede that he was convinced of the wisdom of the amendment. Well, Johnson had staged the whole thing. So it was a marvelous moment. And then there was just a knowledge of the way that things work. In 1965, when the Medicare bill, they called Johnson from the House Speaker's office to tell him that the bill had passed the House. And he got on the phone with each one of the leaders, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, the Speaker himself, 2 other key legislators. And to each one he said, don't let dead cats lie around on the porch, sticking up the place. And what he meant was, when you got a bill, get it past the whole Congress fast. Don't let it sit around so the opposition can gin up votes against you. So he was just immensely wise that way, and I think his legislative record, if you just took the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which is the immense accomplishment, I think the sublime accomplishment of his life, and it really finally made civil rights real. And then the Medicare Act, which has meant so much to all of us who are of a certain age. So at the conclusion, I think everybody, people are increasingly drawing, is that he was a great president except for Vietnam. Well, John Kenneth Galbraith, when someone said that to me, to him, that Johnson was a great president except for Vietnam, Johnson said, Galbraith said, well, that's like saying Switzerland would be a flat country if it weren't for the Alps.